My sister demanded I give her my savings. I said no, bought a one-way ticket abroad, and started a new career. 2 hours later, Dad texted, signed off on her mortgage or don't come back. By midnight, I closed every account she could access. 57 angry calls by morning. The conversation happened on a Tuesday afternoon. I was sitting at my kitchen table, laptop open, reviewing quarterly reports for the consulting firm where I'd spent the last 8 years, climbing from junior analyst to senior project manager. My phone buzzed. Madison's name lit up the screen. "Hey, Jess," she said, her voice carrying that particular brightness she used when she wanted something. "Got a minute? I need to talk about something important." My older sister had always possessed this talent for making her problems sound like shared family emergencies. I closed my laptop, already bracing myself. "Jason and I found the perfect house," she continued without waiting for my response. 4 bedrooms, renovated kitchen, walking distance to those private schools we've been researching. The sellers accepted our offer, but there's a gap in our down payment. I stared at the wall calendar across from me, where I'd circled my upcoming trip to Barcelona. The consulting contract I'd negotiated would start in 3 weeks. My apartment lease had another 4 months remaining, but I'd already discussed breaking it early with my landlord. My work visa had been approved 3 weeks ago after months of paperwork. Everything was arranged. "How much of a gap?" I asked, though something in my chest already knew where this was headed. $38,000. We're short exactly $38,000. She paused, letting the numbers settle. "I know you've been saving aggressively. Dad mentioned you had around $70,000 in your accounts." My jaw tightened. Dad had no business discussing my finances with anyone, but that argument could wait. "Madison, that money represents years of careful planning. I eat budget meals. I haven't taken a real vacation in 4 years, and I've been working towards something specific." "Right. Your big European adventure," she said, dismissiveness creeping into her tone. "Jessica, I'm talking about a house, a real investment, a place where Jason and I can build our future, where our kids will grow up. You're talking about temporarily relocating for some contract work that might not even pan out." The condescension stung more than I expected. Madison had always been the golden child, married at 24 to a man our parents adored, working a respectable job at a pharmaceutical company, talking about children and mortgages, while I was apparently wasting my life on career ambitions. "My contract is signed," I said quietly. "The Barcelona firm is expecting me. This isn't some whim. Then delay it 6 months, maybe a year. Help me secure this house, and once Jason gets his promotion, we'll pay you back with interest." I'd heard variations of this promise throughout our childhood. Madison borrowing my birthday money to buy concert tickets she'd definitely pay back. Madison using my car for a road trip and returning it with an empty tank and a broken taillight. She'd definitely get fixed. Madison taking credit for the history project I'd helped her complete because she'd definitely mentioned my contribution to the teacher. "I'm not delaying my career for your down payment," I said. The line went silent. When Madison spoke again, her voice had dropped to that dangerous quiet. "You're being incredibly selfish right now. Do you understand that? I'm your sister. Family helps family. But apparently your little sabbatical adventure matters more than my actual life. It's not a sabbatical. Mom and Dad are going to be so disappointed when they hear about this, after everything they've done for you, and you can't even help your own sister when she needs you." She hung up before I could respond. 3 hours passed. I tried to focus on work, but my concentration had shattered. Then my phone rang again. Dad's number. "Jessica," he said, skipping any greeting. "Madison called us very upset. She explained the situation with the house." "Did she explain that she wants more than half my savings?" "She explained that you refused to help your sister secure housing for her family. Your mother is beside herself. We raised you better than this." The disappointment in his voice transported me back to childhood. Every time Madison's achievements were celebrated, while my accomplishments were met with polite nods, every time her setbacks became family emergencies, while my struggles were character-building opportunities. "Dad, I have plans, contractual obligations, a career opportunity that could change my entire trajectory." "And Madison has a family to think about," he countered. "She's building something real, something stable. You're chasing consulting contracts across Europe like some college kid on spring break." The comparison landed exactly where he intended. At 32, I was still being treated like the irresponsible younger daughter whose dreams were cute but ultimately frivolous compared to Madison's traditional life path. "I'm not giving her my savings," I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. "Then you better reconsider your priorities," Dad said, "because if you can't support your family when they need you, don't expect us to support your impulsive decisions." He disconnected. I sat motionless for several minutes, phone still pressed to my ear, listening to dead air. Then something shifted inside me. Not anger exactly, but a crystallizing clarity I'd never experienced before. I opened my laptop and pulled up the Barcelona contract. Reading through it again, I felt that flutter of excitement I'd been suppressing under layers of family guilt. The position was perfect, leading a team of analysts for a multinational expansion project, working with cutting-edge methodologies, earning nearly double my current salary with generous housing stipends. My phone buzzed with a text from Madison. Dad said, "You're being difficult. Last chance to do the right thing before I withdraw my offer to pay you back." Her offer, as though she was doing me a favor by proposing to maybe eventually return money she wanted me to gift her. I texted back a single word: no. Then I opened my banking app and bought a one-way ticket to Barcelona, departing in 6 days instead of 3 weeks. The earlier flight cost an extra $800, but watching the confirmation process complete felt like breaking through water after being held underwater too long. My phone rang immediately. "Madison." "What the hell, Jessica? You can't just—" "I can, actually." And I did. I leave in 6 days. "You're making a huge mistake. When this contract falls through and you come crawling back broke and embarrassed, don't expect any of us to bail you out." "I wouldn't dream of it," I said, and ended the call. For 90 minutes. Blessed silence. I started a packing list, researched Barcelona neighborhoods, and emailed my new supervisor to confirm my earlier arrival date. She responded enthusiastically, mentioning they could actually use me for some preliminary work before the official start date. Then Dad texted, "Sign off on Madison's mortgage as a cosigner, or don't bother coming back. Your mother agrees. We stand with your sister." I read it 3 times, each pass revealing new layers of manipulation. They wanted my signature, which meant Madison's finances were worse than she'd admitted, bad enough that she needed a cosigner with my credit score and savings to qualify for the mortgage at all. Co-signing meant liability. If Madison and Jason defaulted, the debt became mine. My credit would crater. My savings could be seized. The Barcelona contract wouldn't matter because I'd be chained to my sister's financial decisions indefinitely. My hands shook as I typed, "I'm not co-signing anything, and if not coming back is the price for living my own life, I'll pay it." His response came instantly. "You're no longer welcome in this family. Don't contact your mother. She's too upset to speak to you anyway." Something broke inside me, but instead of the collapse I expected, it felt like a door slamming shut on a drafty room. Sudden quiet, sudden warmth. I opened my laptop and began working through a mental checklist I hadn't known I was compiling. First, I checked every financial account I maintained. My savings account showed $72,450, less than Dad had quoted to Madison, which meant he'd been exaggerating my assets to pressure me. My checking held another $8,200, investment portfolio at $23,600. Then I found the problem. Years ago, when I'd been 24 and Madison was planning her wedding, I'd added her as an authorized user on one of my credit cards to help her book vendors. She promised it was temporary, just until her own credit improved post-W expenses. I'd forgotten about it entirely. The card now showed a balance of $6,847. Recent charges included boutique purchases, restaurant bills, and a spa package, all within the last 3 weeks, right around when Madison would have been preparing her pitch for my savings. My phone buzzed continuously now. Mom's number, Madison's again. Unknown numbers that I suspected were other family members being mobilized for the guilt campaign. I ignored them all and called my credit card company. "I need to remove an authorized user and dispute recent charges," I told the representative. While on hold, I opened my bank's website and discovered something worse. Madison had listed herself as a beneficiary on one of my savings accounts. Not joint ownership, but positioned to claim the funds if something happened to me. The setup dated back 5 years. Another favor I'd granted and forgotten. Another way she'd embedded herself in my financial life. The credit card representative returned. We've removed Madison Chen as an authorized user. Regarding the disputed charges, we'll need to investigate. I authorized her card access years ago, but never approved these specific purchases, I explained. She used the card without my knowledge or consent after I denied her a loan request. This was technically true. The representative's tone shifted, becoming more sympathetic. She initiated a fraud investigation and reversed the charges temporarily while they reviewed the case. Next, I called my bank. Removing Madison as beneficiary required a simple form which they emailed immediately. I completed it and scanned it back within minutes. Then I went further. Madison had my login information for a shared streaming service we'd split for years. That login email matched my primary email address, the one connected to my banking, my investments, my entire digital life. I'd been meaning to change it forever, using work or exhaustion as excuses. But really, I just never imagined needing this level of security against my own sister. I changed every password, every security question, every recovery email and phone number. I enabled two-factor authentication on accounts that had been operating on trust alone. Each change felt like sealing a window I'd left open for years, never realizing how vulnerable I'd been. My phone hit 23 missed calls around 11 p.m. I silenced it entirely and kept working. I contacted my investment broker and added additional security protocols. Verbal passwords required for any transactions, no changes to beneficiary designations without in-person verification and government ID. The overnight representative sounded confused by my urgency until I explained I was protecting my assets from family members with access to my personal information. That's actually more common than you'd think, she said kindly. I'm setting up the extra protection now. Your accounts are locked down tight. Finally, around midnight, I opened my email and drafted a message to everyone in my immediate family. I'm relocating to Barcelona for a consulting contract. I will not be co-signing Madison's mortgage, contributing to her down payment, or maintaining any shared financial access with family members going forward. All accounts have been secured. This isn't negotiable or open for discussion. I wish you all well. I added my professional email address, the one they didn't have, and specified that my personal email would be discontinued. Then I pressed send and closed my laptop. Sleep seemed impossible, but exhaustion dragged me under around 2 a.m. I woke at 7 to my phone's persistent vibrating despite silent mode. The screen showed 57 missed calls, 34 text messages, and 12 voicemails. I made coffee first, then I sat down and began reading. Madison's texts evolved from angry to desperate to threatening over the course of the night. 1:15 a.m. You petty. I can't believe you closed everything. We needed that card for closing costs. 1:47 a.m. Jason is furious. You've ruined everything. The house is going to fall through because of you. 2:23 a.m. Dad's right. You're selfish and immature, and you're going to end up alone with your stupid career. 3:08 a.m. Please, Jessica, please, we're family. I'm begging you to reconsider. 3:45 a.m. Fine, keep your precious money, but don't come crawling back when your Barcelona dream falls apart. Dad's voicemails were colder. You've made your choice. Don't expect to be invited to family events. Your mother is devastated. I hope whatever you're chasing is worth losing all of us. Mom left one message, her voice thick with tears. I don't understand why you're being so cruel to your sister. She's always looked up to you, and this is how you repay her love. This last one almost broke my resolve. Almost. Then I remembered being 14, working my first job at a frozen yogurt shop, saving for a school trip to Washington, D.C. I kept my cash in a lockbox under my bed. One morning, half of it was gone. Madison had taken it for a concert ticket, and when confronted, Mom had said, "She's your older sister. Sharing is what families do." I'd never made that trip to Washington. The coffee tasted bitter, but I drank it anyway, feeling the caffeine sharpen my thoughts. I had 4 days now before my flight. 4 days to finish severing ties, to prepare for a life where my family's emergencies were no longer my mandatory crisis. Around 9:00 a.m., Madison called from Jason's phone. I answered, curious what new angle she'd attempt. Jessica. Jason's voice, measured and diplomatic. Look, I think things got heated last night. We're all just stressed about the house situation. Can we meet for coffee and talk this through like adults? There's nothing to talk through. My decision is final. I get that you're upset, but shutting down the credit card in the middle of our closing process was extreme. Madison's been crying all night. She genuinely didn't realize those charges would be a problem. She charged nearly $7,000 without asking permission, Jason, while simultaneously demanding $38,000 more. What part of that seems okay to you? His pause stretched long enough that I could hear Madison coaching him in the background, her voice an urgent whisper. She thought the card was still available for family use, he said finally. She was trying to furnish our future home, make it nice for when we have kids. On my credit, with my money. After I explicitly said no to funding your down payment, my voice stayed level, which seemed to unsettle him more than anger would have. Jason, I genuinely hope you two figure out the house situation, but not with my financial backing. You're really going to let your sister lose her dream home over this? Madison is 35 years old with a husband and 2 incomes. If you can't afford this house, buy something less expensive. That's what adults do. I hung up before he could respond. The next 3 days blurred together, packing, forwarding mail, negotiating an early lease termination with my landlord. Mrs. Patterson was surprisingly accommodating when I explained I was leaving for Barcelona 4 months ahead of schedule. She'd lived in Spain for a decade in her 20s and spoke wistfully about Mediterranean sunsets and the freedom of reinvention. You're doing the brave thing, she said, agreeing to a reasonable early termination fee that I could easily afford. Most people spend their whole lives thinking about it. Each evening, my phone's missed call count climbed. Various cousins, family friends, even Madison's college roommate, whom I'd met exactly twice, everyone had been recruited to convince me I was making a terrible mistake, destroying family bonds over money, betraying the sister who'd always been there for me. On the second day, my cousin Derek showed up at my apartment unannounced. I opened the door to find him standing there with coffee and an apologetic expression that immediately put me on guard. Before you slam the door, he said, I'm not here to lecture you. Can I come in for 5 minutes? Against my better judgment, I let him inside. He surveyed the half-packed boxes and the growing pile of items tagged for donation. You're really doing this, he said, sounding impressed rather than judgmental. I really am. Derek set the coffee on my kitchen counter and leaned against it, arms crossed. Your dad called my mom, asked her to reach out to me, have me talk some sense into you. He painted this whole picture of you abandoning the family in their time of need, and you came to deliver that message? Hell no. I came to tell you I think you're a badass. He grinned. Madison's been a nightmare since we were kids. Remember when she convinced everyone I'd stolen money from Grandma's purse at Christmas? Turned out she'd taken it for some limited edition makeup palette, but I was the one who got grounded for 3 months. I'd forgotten about that incident, but the memory surfaced now. Derek's protests of innocence, Madison's tearful insistence that she'd seen him near Grandma's purse, the family division that had lasted well into spring. Why didn't anyone believe you? I asked. Same reason they don't believe you now. Madison's always been skilled at playing the victim while orchestrating chaos. He picked up his coffee cup. Anyway, I wanted you to know not everyone thinks you're the villain here. My mom doesn't either, for what it's worth. She just won't contradict your dad publicly. After Derek left, I felt marginally less isolated. But the calls continued, each one from someone who had accepted Madison's version of events without question, who couldn't fathom that the quiet, responsible younger sister might have legitimate grievances. My former college roommate, Vanessa, called that evening. Unlike the others, she opened with, "Tell me your side." So I did. I explained the years of small borrowings that became large debts, the expectation that my success existed to subsidize Madison's lifestyle, the credit card charges and the co-signing demand, and the ultimatum from my parents. Jesus, Vanessa said when I finished. And they're making you out to be the monster. Pretty much. Jessica, I've known you for 12 years. You're the person who budget planned for 6 months before buying a new laptop. The idea that you'd refuse to help family over petty selfishness is insane. She paused. For whatever it's worth, I think you're making the right choice, and I'm jealous as hell that you have the courage to actually do it. We talked for another hour about Barcelona, about the contract, about the life I was building toward. By the time we hung up, Some of the doubt that had been accumulating had dissolved. The third day brought an unexpected visitor, Jason's older brother, Marcus, whom I'd met perhaps 3 times at family events. He caught me in the parking garage as I was loading boxes into a friend's truck for storage. "Jessica, wait!" he called, jogging toward me. I turned, wary. Marcus had always seemed decent, but family loyalty ran deep. "Look, I'm supposed to be here convincing you to reconsider," he said, slightly out of breath. "Jason asked me to talk to you, appeal to your sense of family responsibility, all that, but—" He hesitated. "But I've been watching my brother and your sister's financial train wreck for 2 years now, and I told him months ago they couldn't afford the house they were pursuing." Marcus shook his head. "They ignored every piece of practical advice I gave them. Jason's been living beyond his means since college, and Madison enables it while making it worse with her own spending." This was news to me. I'd assumed Jason was the stable one, the responsible husband grounding Madison's impulsiveness. "Their credit is terrible," Marcus continued. "They've maxed out multiple cards. They're barely making minimum payments. And somehow they convinced themselves that a massive mortgage was the solution. When Jason told me they'd lined you up as a cosigner, I warned him you'd be insane to agree." He didn't mention that. "Of course not, because I also told him that if they defaulted, they'd destroy your credit and probably your career prospects." He met my eyes directly. "You dodging this bullet is the smartest thing you could have done. I'm here to tell you that, not to guilt trip you." After Marcus left, I sat in my nearly empty apartment, feeling vindicated but also unsettled. How many other family members privately agreed with me, but publicly supported Madison out of obligation or fear of conflict? That night, I received an email from Madison herself. No subject line, just several paragraphs of raw emotion. "Jessica, I've spent the last 3 days trying to understand how you could be so cruel. We're sisters. We shared a childhood, shared parents, shared everything. And the first time I ask you for real help, you turn your back on me. Do you remember when you were 16 and you wanted to go to that art program in Rhode Island? Mom and Dad said it was too expensive, but I used my graduation money to help pay for it. I sacrificed for you. I've always sacrificed for you. Now I'm asking for the same support, and you're acting like I'm some stranger trying to scam you. The credit card charges, I was furnishing our house. A place where you'd have been welcome any time, where your future nieces and nephews would have grown up knowing their aunt. But instead, you've chosen a job over family. You've chosen money over love. And when you're sitting alone in some foreign country with nobody who actually cares about you, remember that you made this choice." I read it through twice, then opened my documents folder and found the art program information from 16 years ago. It took some searching, but I eventually located the financial records my parents had kept. The program had cost $3,000. I'd earned $1,800 from my yogurt shop job. Mom and Dad had contributed $800. The final $400 had come from our grandmother, not Madison. Madison's graduation money had gone toward a car, a detail I remembered clearly, because she'd driven it to my high school graduation and accidentally scraped the bumper, which I'd felt guilty about for years, even though I hadn't been driving. She'd rewritten history so thoroughly that she might have actually believed her version. Or maybe she'd always known the truth and counted on me not checking. I didn't respond to her email. There was nothing to say to someone who would lie that egregiously and expect to go unchallenged. The morning of my departure, I woke at 4:00 a.m., too restless to sleep. I made coffee and stood by my apartment window, watching Philadelphia's pre-dawn streets, wondering if I'd feel nostalgic later for this view, this city, this life I was abandoning. I didn't feel nostalgic, I felt free. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "Please don't go. We can work this out. Family is everything." I stared at that message for a long time. Family is everything. The phrase that had governed my entire existence, that had been wielded like a weapon every time I considered prioritizing myself. But family wasn't everything. Some families were toxic. Some families demanded you set yourself on fire to provide them warmth. Some families loved you conditionally, only when you were useful, compliant, willing to sacrifice your dreams for their comfort. I typed back, "Families should want what's best for each other. This is what's best for me." Then I silenced my phone, gathered my luggage, and headed for the airport. Except Madison had never been there for me. Not when I'd worked 3 part-time jobs to avoid student loans while she partied through undergrad on mom and dad's dime. Not when I'd spent my 27th birthday alone in a hospital waiting room during an appendectomy because she'd been too busy with wedding dress shopping. Not when I'd been passed over for promotion last year and she'd responded with, "Well, maybe if you were more of a team player like Jason." The realizations kept coming, each one a small earthquake, rearranging my internal landscape. The night before my flight, I allowed myself one moment of doubt. I sat in my empty apartment, surrounded by suitcases and boxes designated for storage, and considered calling Madison, apologizing, finding some compromise that would restore the family peace. Then my phone rang. Unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Jessica, this is Aunt Carol, my mother's older sister, a woman I'd always respected for her directness." "Hi, Aunt Carol. I'm calling because your mother asked me to, but not for the reason she thinks." Carol's voice carried a wry amusement. "She wanted me to convince you to help Madison with this house purchase. Instead, I'm calling to tell you congratulations on your new job and to ask if you need anything before you leave." The kindness caught me completely off guard. My throat tightened. "Thank you," I managed. "Your mother means well, but she's always enabled Madison's entitlement. Your father, too. They've spent 3 decades treating you like the responsible one who doesn't need support because you're so capable, while Madison gets rescued from every consequence." She paused. "I watched you grow up apologizing for taking up space while your sister demanded the spotlight. If you don't leave now, you'll still be apologizing at 50. Tears spilled over before I could stop them. "I'm scared," I admitted. "What if they're right? What if I regret this?" "Then you regret it in Barcelona with an international career and your savings intact," Carol said firmly. "Much better than regretting it in Philadelphia, broke and resentful, wondering what you could have become." We talked for another hour. She told me stories I'd never heard about my mother and Madison's relationship, patterns that had apparently been replicating themselves across generations. By the time we hung up, something had settled in my chest. Not certainty exactly, but the absence of that desperate need for family approval that had governed my decisions for 3 decades. I boarded the flight at 6:20 p.m. the next day. My phone stayed in airplane mode. Barcelona welcomed me with golden light and Mediterranean warmth. The apartment my new company had arranged overlooked a narrow street lined with cafes, their outdoor tables filled with people speaking rapid Spanish, their laughter rising toward my third-floor windows. The first week passed in a blur of orientation meetings, team introductions, and intensive language practice with a tutor the company provided. My supervisor, Elena, was demanding but encouraging, pushing our team toward innovative approaches while trusting our expertise. She introduced me to her network across the city, and suddenly I was having dinners with professionals from 6 different countries, discussing projects and possibilities I'd never imagined accessible. 2 weeks in, I finally checked the phone number I'd kept active for emergencies. 43 new voicemails. I deleted them without listening, but I did read through the texts, watching the evolution from anger to bargaining to eventually a kind of resigned hostility. Madison's final message, sent 3 days after I'd left. The house fell through. Jason's parents had to co-sign a different property in a worse neighborhood because apparently you weren't the only person who refused to help us. I hope you're happy. You've destroyed our future for your selfish adventure. I felt something reading that, but it wasn't guilt. It was clarity. Their backup plan had involved multiple people refusing to take on their financial risk. I wasn't the villain. I was just the first person who'd said no. A week later, I received a Facebook message from someone I hadn't thought about in years. Rachel, Madison's maid of honor from her wedding. We'd never been close, but she'd always been kind to me at family gatherings. "Jessica, I hope this doesn't seem intrusive, but I wanted to reach out. Madison's been posting constantly about what happened, painting you as this selfish monster, and it's not sitting right with me. I've known Madison for 15 years, and I've watched her pull similar stunts on other people. You're just the first person who actually said no and stuck to it." We ended up video chatting that evening. Rachel told me stories I'd never heard. Madison borrowing money from mutual friends and never repaying it, Madison taking credit for group projects in college, Madison manipulating situations to ensure she always came out looking like the victim or the hero. "There was this one time senior year," Rachel said, When Madison convinced three of us to pool money for a beach house rental for spring break, we each put in $400. Then she discovered the place was already booked and kept our money to save for next year. We never saw that money again, and there was never a next year. Why did you stay friends with her? I asked. Rachel's expression turned rueful. Honestly, because being on Madison's good side was easier than being on her bad side. She's charismatic and fun when she wants to be, but cross her and she'll run a campaign against you that makes high school bullying look subtle. She paused. I'm not proud of that, but watching what she's doing to you now, how she's mobilized your whole family against you, it's finally made me see how toxic that friendship was. I've been slowly distancing myself. That conversation shifted something in me. I'd spent weeks second-guessing myself, wondering if I'd overreacted, if maybe I should have found some compromise, but Rachel's perspective confirmed what I'd suspected. Madison's behavior wasn't about me specifically. It was a pattern, and I was just the first person in our family brave enough to break it. The work in Barcelona intensified as I moved past orientation into actual project management. Our team was developing a supply chain optimization model for a client, expanding into Eastern European markets, and the complexity was exhilarating. Elena pushed us hard, but celebrated our wins enthusiastically, and I found myself working longer hours than I ever had in Philadelphia while feeling energized rather than drained. 3 weeks into the project, Elena pulled me aside after a successful presentation to the client. Jessica, you have exceptional instincts for this work, she said. The way you identified those bottlenecks in the distribution network, the client specifically mentioned how impressed they were. Thank you. It's a fascinating project. I want to be transparent with you about something, Elena continued. When we hired you, we saw your resume and were confident in your technical skills, but we'd had challenges with some American hires adjusting to the international environment, the cultural differences, the ambiguity. I had concerns about whether you'd thrive here. My stomach tightened slightly. And now? Now I'm wondering if you'd consider extending your contract beyond the initial term. We have projects lined up in Amsterdam, Prague, and potentially Singapore. You'd be leading larger teams, taking on more strategic responsibility. She smiled. Essentially, I'm asking if you'd be interested in making this permanent rather than temporary. The offer was everything I'd hoped for, but hadn't dared to expect so quickly. I told Elena I'd need time to consider, but internally, I already knew my answer. The life I was building here felt more authentic than anything I'd left behind. That evening, I walked through the Gothic quarter, watching tourists and locals mingle in the plazas, and called Vanessa. They offered me a permanent position, I told her. Multiple international projects, significant raise, leadership track. Jessica, that's incredible. Are you going to take it? I think so, but it means fully committing to this life. No more pretending this is temporary. No more safety net of returning to Philadelphia if things don't work out. Do you want to return to Philadelphia? Vanessa asked pointedly. I thought about my empty apartment, my family's conditional love, the weight of expectations I'd carried for 3 decades. No, I really don't. Then stop treating this amazing opportunity like you need permission to be happy. Take the job, build the life, send me pictures of Barcelona sunsets, and make me jealous. I accepted Elena's offer the next day. Signing the contract felt like the moment on the airplane when the wheels leave the runway, that instant of committed flight where turning back becomes impossible. My new permanent status required paperwork, visa extensions, setting up a local bank account, finding a long-term apartment. Each administrative task felt like putting down roots, anchoring myself to this new reality. I spent weekends apartment hunting, eventually finding a place near Park de la Ciudadela with tall windows and a tiny balcony where I could drink morning coffee and watch the neighborhood wake up. The day I signed the lease, I took a photo of the empty living room, sunlight streaming across hardwood floors, and posted it to social media with a simple caption, "Home." Within hours, comments flooded in from college friends, former colleagues, acquaintances from Philadelphia congratulating me. But there were also comments from family members, cousins, my uncle, even some of my parents' friends, with variations of beautiful, so happy for you. That felt pointed, deliberate statements of support, despite the family drama. Madison didn't comment, but she sent a direct message. Cute apartment. Must be nice spending my house money on yourself. I blocked her immediately, surprised by how little hesitation I felt. Around this time, I started therapy with an English-speaking psychologist Elena recommended. Dr. Martinez specialized in expatriates and cultural adjustment, but our sessions quickly evolved into unpacking family dynamics and the guilt I still carried about choosing myself. You speak about your family's needs as though they're objective facts, Dr. Martinez observed during our third session. But needs and wants are different things. Your sister wanted your money. She didn't need it. But the house, there are thousands of houses. If they couldn't afford that specific house, they could have chosen differently. Their want became framed as a need to manipulate you. The sessions helped me see how thoroughly I'd been conditioned to prioritize others' desires over my own well-being. How family comes first had actually meant Jessica's needs come last. How what I supposed was selfishness was actually just basic self-preservation. Weeks turned into months. The consulting project exceeded every expectation. Our team delivered ahead of schedule, under budget, and the client was already negotiating an extension. Elena offered me a permanent position with a substantial raise and a pathway to partnership. I found an apartment of my own, a sun-drenched space near Parque de la Ciutadella. I learned Spanish with increasing fluency, made friends with colleagues and neighbors, spent weekends exploring the Catalonian countryside. I dated casually, nothing serious, but discovered what it felt like to have conversations where my career ambitions were admired instead of tolerated. 6 months after leaving Philadelphia, I received an email from Aunt Carol with a subject line, "Thought you should know." Inside was a forwarded news article about a local woman arrested for insurance fraud. Madison. The details were sparse, but apparently she and Jason had attempted to stage a burglary at their rental property to collect on an inflated contents policy. The investigation had uncovered previous suspicious claims. I read it 3 times, feeling oddly detached. The sister I'd grown up with felt like someone from another lifetime, someone else's memories. Carol's note at the bottom said simply, "Your parents are mortified, but still blaming you somehow. Thought you'd want to know. You dodged quite a bullet." I replied, "Thank you for keeping me informed, and thank you for the conversation before I left. It changed everything." Another 3 months passed. Christmas approached, my first completely alone, and I discovered I felt excited rather than melancholy. I'd been invited to 7 different celebrations by various friends and colleagues. I chose a dinner hosted by Elena and her wife, where we ate too much and laughed until midnight, and I felt more at home than I had in decades of obligatory family gatherings. My phone rang while I was walking home through festive streets, my breath visible in the unusual cold. Unknown number with a Philadelphia area code. I almost declined. Then curiosity won. "Hello?" "Jessica, it's Mom." I stopped walking. People flowed around me, couples and groups heading toward late-night celebrations. "How did you get this number?" "Carol gave it to me. Please don't be angry with her. I begged." She paused, and I could hear her gathering courage. "Your father doesn't know I'm calling." "What do you want, Mom?" "I wanted to wish you Merry Christmas." Her voice cracked. "And I wanted to apologize. For all of it. For taking Madison's side without hearing yours. For treating your ambitions like hobbies while elevating hers. For raising you to believe you were selfish if you weren't sacrificing everything for family." I stood there, phone pressed to my ear, struggling to process. "What changed?" I asked finally. "Madison's legal troubles forced me to see things clearly," she said. "The fraud, the lies to the insurance company, the financial mess she and Jason created, all of it looked so familiar because I'd watched her manipulate and scheme her whole life. But I called it ambition. I called it needing support." She inhaled shakily. "And I called you selfish for refusing to enable it. Dad still disagrees. Your father is stubborn, but he's also started asking questions about where we went wrong with Madison. He won't admit it to you, probably not for years, but he knows." A long pause. "You were right to leave, Jessica. You were right about everything. Right." We talked for an hour. She asked about Barcelona, about my work, about my life with genuine interest I couldn't recall receiving before. I told her some of it cautiously, testing whether this change was real or temporary guilt. Before hanging up, she said, "I don't expect you to forgive me immediately, or maybe ever, but I needed you to know that I see you now, who you actually are, not who I projected onto you, and I'm proud of you." I cried after we disconnected, standing on a corner in Barcelona's Gothic quarter, tears freezing on my cheeks. But they weren't tears of regret. The Barcelona project extended into a permanent position, then a promotion. I built a life I'd never imagined possible, professionally fulfilled, financially secure, surrounded by people who valued me for my capabilities rather than my compliance. Madison eventually reached out through a carefully worded email 9 months after I'd left. No real apology, but an acknowledgement that things got complicated, and a suggestion we might reconnect when tensions cooled. I responded politely, but without commitment, and let the correspondence fade naturally. Dad never called. That hurt sometimes, in quiet moments. But the pain was clean. Not the infected wound of ongoing manipulation, but the healthy ache of a cut that's healing properly. A year and a half after leaving Philadelphia, I stood in my Barcelona apartment reviewing a proposal for a project in Singapore. My team was being invited to consult on an international expansion even larger than the one that had brought me here. 2 years minimum commitment. Extraordinary compensation. My phone sat silent on the counter, no missed calls from family demanding my time, my money, my acquiescence. No guilt about choosing my path. I accepted the Singapore offer that evening, then called Aunt Carol to share the news. "You sound happy," she said. "I am, actually, genuinely happy." "Your mother will be pleased to hear that. She asks about you constantly." "Tell her I'm thriving. Tell her I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." Because I was. The girl who'd have sacrificed everything to keep family peace no longer existed. In her place was a woman who'd learned that the most loving thing you can do for yourself is refuse to set yourself on fire to keep others warm. The angry calls had stopped by morning, eventually replaced by this, the quiet satisfaction of a life built on my own terms, in a city that felt more like home than anywhere I'd been before, with a future limited only by my own ambition rather than someone else's demands. Madison got her house eventually, something smaller and more affordable, funded by Jason's parents under strict conditions. She and I exchange cards on holidays now, superficial pleasantries that acknowledged our shared history without requiring reconciliation. And me? I'm writing this from my Singapore apartment overlooking Marina Bay, preparing for another week of challenges I've chosen, obstacles I'm equipped to handle, and success I've earned rather than inherited or demanded. 57 angry calls felt like the end of my family. Turned out it was just the beginning of my life.